Well, hey guys, it's Dr. Drake 63 here again today. I want to thank you for joining me, and today we're going to talk about a new to me firearm, and that is the Beretta 92S. And you might ask, well, what makes this different from the FS model, the M9 that the military used for a long time? And some of the basic differences have to do with where the magazine release is located. You can see right here on this particular model, made in Italy, has the European style, old style mag release right down here on the heel. Also has a rounded trigger guard. The 92SF has a square trigger guard. There's fire block safety and some other things that are common to the newer models, but this is a made in Italy version. It was brought back by a particular distributor, R Guns, out of Illinois. And this particular firearm is got some definite wear on it. When I first got it, it had rubberized grips on it. I'm not a big fan of that. I like the thinner profile of the original issue. It's got some of the things that you see with police guns and military guns, such as this lanyard loop, but it's feels pretty good in hand. It's a 15+1 capacity. There are 17 round magazines available for this, and also point out that it's got a decocker, which basically means, this being a single action, double action firearm, you can pull it in double action, or you can cock it back and pull it in single action. And what the decocker does, basically it's not a safety. What it does is allow you to load your firearm, chamber your firearm, and then bring this hammer back. And I'll show you again a little bit closer right here. You see I've got my trigger pulled back, and when I pull this forward, it decocks it. Very much like the CZs I've owned. And your trigger's doing nothing. It disengages your trigger at that point. Now, I've always been a guy that was not a big fan of this open slide on the Beretta 92, and you know, thinking, well, it could get dirtier, expose the barrel and the internals, and we'll take a look at the inside of this thing and see that's probably not that big a case. Most common and current version of this gun is the 92FS with the square trigger guard, as you see. Here's a compact version with a shorter barrel. And a lot of us are familiar with the M9, which was the U.S. military version of a sidearm starting in 1985. And the serial number on my gun only tells me that it is Italian-made, Italian police issue. It does not tell me the year of manufacturing. Now, the Beretta 92 is a gun that was originally developed in the mid-70s. The S model was produced a few years later than that, just from some trials and live and learn with that model, and some things were changed, notably mounting a safety / decocker on the frame. The previous models had it on the slide, but that was pretty much the differences that were involved. Now, this gun was produced and used widely in police and militaries throughout the world. Some version of this later on with the 92FS, I should say, and later the M9, which had a squared trigger and some safety features that Americans liked. These older versions, if you look at this, you've got next to no sight picture at all. Low bore axis, all that kind of good stuff, but we'll see when we do a shooting video how that affects accuracy. But this gun was developed to compete with other 9mm of the day, and probably its biggest competitor was the Browning High Power. And the big deal being double stack magazines, as well as the ability to have a rapid fire 9mm that used some version of a tilted barrel type mechanism with this. We'll show that in a minute. Also, it competed heavily with the CZ75, CZ75B, and Smith & Wesson and others came out with metal frame 9mm semi-auto handguns. This one here has an alloy frame and a blued steel slide, again with that open slide design. You can see your extractor right here. And this being an older gun, I would believe that some of the parts I might need to replace it'd be springs, extractor, things like that. But I'm not going to replace them unless I have a reason to. But this thing is definitely not in the best shape. Not gonna portray it as being any differently. It's seen some wear. If I was really interested in dressing this up, maybe put some wood grips on it or something like that. But I'm not really interested in doing that. This is going to be the proverbial truck gun, a shooter, not a shower. But it's interesting. Let's take a look at the weights now between these two firearms. So you see, unloaded, this Beretta is coming in at 1 pound, 14.7 ounces. And I think it's advertised as 33 ounces. So this is a little bit lighter than 33 ounces according to my scale. And if we want to compare that to the unloaded high power, you're saving about an ounce. So it's not a big difference. Not a big difference. Probably the biggest improvement, at least in my mind, that this CZ offers over the high power is in the safety. And the fact that it's double action, single action. So rather than have to engage a safety or anything, you've got that long first trigger pull, and then once you've started firing it, or when the hammer is back, it's a very short and manageable. It's about a 7.5, 8 pound pull. Okay. And the difference between that and, say, the high powers is with the high power, you'd have this cocked, and then you would need to engage the safety. And basically that's how you would work that. So it's easier to carry and more safe to carry in a ready-to-go condition with a single action, double action decocker. And that's what I would consider an improvement over the high power. And a lot of the later models, of course, had things like that before we got into the striker fire pistols. But these two definitely were competitors for a long time and still in use today in various militaries or police units across the world. Slowly being phased out, but for years, you either were seeing a high power, you were seeing some version of the 92, or you were seeing a CZ. And again, like we mentioned, Smith & Wesson and some others. Now, the takedown on this pistol is pretty basic. First of all, we want to make sure that there's not a round in the chamber, and there's not. But basically, you're using a combination of pushing in on this button on the right side of the pistol so that it allows you to lift this lever upwards, and that's going to release your slide. So while I push that button and push that lever down, now my slide comes completely off. And here's your internal workings. And here's your slide. And it's got a little bit different approach. You still have the spring with the guide rod that comes out just like that. And then you've got a real interesting feature whereby you lift the barrel up just like that. And this is what it pivots on. This piece right here. Here's your firing pin. So very, very interesting approach. And this part actually can just slide right out and you can clean it. But that's about it for the barrel. And then here you can see inside your slide, your firing pin is in the back. Protrudes right here. And if you look closely, you'll see there's a relatively beefy extractor in there. But that's about it. And then the frame-mounted decocker, as we showed you. Let's take a look inside this barrel. As you can see, nice and shiny. Looking at the other end. And if you take a real quick look here, you'll see the feed ramp. And just for the fun of it, I cycled a whole bunch of different types of round nose and flat nose 9mm through there, just hand cycling it, and everything worked great. So I don't expect any problems. To contrast that, I have a real hard time on this older Browning 9mm cycling hollow point rounds. It loves the ball ammo. That's what it was designed to shoot. But in terms of some other stuff, you really need to do some work on the feed ramp and so forth if you wanted to successfully cycle modern hollow points. That piece drops in. You want to make sure that this is depressed, and then you can put your guide rod and your spring right back in. If you look real close, there's just like a little nipple coming off the end there. Not much purchase, but that's enough to get you started. As far as reassembly, you push it back on, and then I'm going to flip this right back up, and we're locked back in place. And there you go. There is no magazine disconnect, although one thing I did notice, because the magazine release is located down here on the heel, that the magazine has a cutout down there to accept that. So if you're looking at Beretta magazines and you're wondering whether or not it's going to work with this version of the gun, you want to make sure that there's a cutout there. Now, according to Beretta, for many years, and I don't know if this is still the case, they manufactured all 92 versions with this so that you'd have the ability to use any magazine on a retro gun. And here you have stuff just like that high power in a lot of the older 1911s. It doesn't have a flared mag well or anything that makes it easy to do a lot of the competition speed shooting, but just philosophy of use over time. Now, one thing, if you watch my videos and you pay any kind of attention, you'll know I'm not a guy that pays a premium for a surplus type or used firearm that is in perfect condition. I'm not a 95% guy or anything like that. I use these guys to shoot, but I don't have to point out to you, just a quick glance here, that there's some surface flaws with these firearms. And what I do is I make sure that they've got working springs, that they're properly lubricated, and things of that nature. That's what's important to me. Neither of these would fall into a collector's grade, and I'd probably be afraid to shoot them much if I did. But this one right here, I'm not going to think twice, is something that I carry in the center console of my truck. If it gets nicked up a little bit, I really don't care. I got this gun for its usability and durability, and these have a great record for that. You can see, though, that if you're the type that would want to come in and re-adonize the paint or whatever, this is a frame that is an alloy frame. It's nothing you'd want to blue. Slide's a different story, but again, I'm just not worrying about those stuff. I just want to protect firearms from rust. These are the grips that came on these. And they're rubberized. In some respects, they're a little bit better for gripping, but they're also thicker enough that I notice it in hand. And that's why I like these slimmer profile kind of grips. I've got thick hands, which means even though people say, hey, you have big hands, because my hands are so thick, I really want to have a smaller grip, because this, mostly right here, this big honking muscle that works my thumb gets in the way. But you can get these today. If you search the internet and you look up police turn-in Berettas, Beretta 92S's, there's a number of places that carry them. You can get ones, I've seen examples that aren't as nice as this. I've seen examples that are nicer, and they're all relatively inexpensive for a handgun of that quality for sure. A lot harder to find these high powers, especially all Belgian made and assembled. The last thing I'm going to do is give you a dimensional comparison. And you'll see I lined up the spurs right there, and then going forward, and you'll see that the Beretta is a good 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch longer altogether in the slide and where that barrel protrudes. So something to think about if you're gonna carry that. I definitely would envision this as being too big for a concealed carry gun. I guess you could go, 6 o'clock position or something like that, but you wouldn't want to sit down with that guy in there. Of course, you skinny boys out there, you could probably appendix carry that thing, no problem. So I've got some range time planned tomorrow. Hopefully that all works out, outdoor weather and so forth, and we're going to see how this shoots. I've been wanting one of these for a long time. You'd be remiss if you were into some of the older collectible milsurp stuff, police surplus and things like that, to not get your hands on some version of the Beretta 92. And again, this is the S version. This is made in Italy. Very glad to have it. Look forward to giving this its trials and telling you how she shoots. I've heard they're very accurate. Based on the condition of this barrel, we'll find that out, and I expect the only limiting factor is going to be very short, non-marked sights, and we're all used to brighter, taller sights in today's world, so I imagine that'll be the biggest challenge, but obviously want to see how it does in terms of function feeding and things like that, and we'll bring you a short video to talk about that. This is Dr. Drake 63. I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and so long.